Story number 1: The Phantom of the Rainy Night. If you enjoy this content and want to see more, please subscribe and turn on notifications to support the channel. Emily had always been comfortable working the night shift at the small, historical hotel. The building had its quirks, but the tranquility of the rainy nights made her feel at peace. One stormy evening, as she was finishing some paperwork, she heard the faint sound of sobbing echoing through the halls. Curious, she grabbed her flashlight and followed the sound, which led her to the old storage room in the basement. As she approached, the sobbing grew louder, mixed with the sound of rain pounding against the windows. She hesitated at the door, her heart racing, but pushed it open. Inside, the room was dimly lit by a flickering bulb. Among the stacks of old furniture and boxes, Emily saw a figure sitting on the floor, hunched over and crying. It was a woman, dressed in an old-fashioned white dress, drenched as if she had been outside in the storm. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she stepped closer. "Are you okay?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. The woman didn't respond but continued to sob, rocking back and forth. Emily reached out to touch her shoulder, but her hand passed right through the woman, hitting the cold, damp air. Panic surged through Emily as she realized she was seeing a ghost. She stumbled back, her flashlight flickering and casting eerie shadows on the walls. The woman's sobbing grew more intense, and she began to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "He promised he would come back," the ghostly woman said. "But he never did. I waited here, night after night, until the rain washed me away." Emily's fear turned into a mix of sadness and empathy. "Who are you?" she asked softly. The woman lifted her head, revealing tear-streaked cheeks and hollow, haunted eyes. "My name is Margaret. This was my home once. I loved a man who promised to return to me, but he never did. I died waiting for him, and now I can't leave." Emily felt a chill run down her spine as she listened to Margaret's story. The sorrow in her voice was palpable, filling the room with an overwhelming sense of loss. Emily wanted to help but didn't know how. "You don't have to wait anymore," Emily said gently. "It's okay to let go." Margaret's sobbing slowly ceased, and she looked at Emily with a faint, sad smile. "Thank you," she whispered before fading away into the shadows. Emily stood in the now silent room, her heart heavy. She never spoke of the encounter to anyone, but from that night on, she made sure to avoid the storage room. The rain continued to fall, and Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Margaret's sorrow still lingered, waiting for her lost love. And so, the legend of Margaret, the ghostly woman in the white dress, became a whispered tale among the staff. They said that on stormy nights, you could still hear her sobbing, echoing through the halls, a reminder of a love that never returned and a heart that never healed. Story number 2: The Haunting of the Warehouse. It was a typical rainy night in the quiet town where Jason worked as a security guard at an old, abandoned warehouse. The building had once been a bustling hub of activity but had fallen into disuse and disrepair over the years. His job was simple: to ensure that no trespassers entered the property. But on nights like this, the rain added an eerie atmosphere to the already spooky place. Jason had just started his shift, the sound of the rain pounding against the roof and windows creating a rhythmic, almost hypnotic beat. He made his rounds, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the darkness, revealing rusting machinery and forgotten crates covered in a thick layer of dust. As he walked past a row of old office rooms, he heard a faint whisper, barely audible over the rain. "Help me." Jason froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He strained his ears, but the whisper didn't come again. Shaking it off as his imagination, he continued his patrol. However, the feeling of being watched grew stronger with every step he took. Reaching the back of the warehouse, he noticed a faint light coming from one of the offices. Curious and cautious, he approached the door, which was slightly ajar. Pushing it open, he found the room empty, save for an old desk and chair. The light was coming from a small, dusty lamp on the desk, flickering erratically. As Jason stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind him with a force that made him jump. He spun around, trying the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic began to set in as he pounded on the door, calling for help, but his voice was swallowed by the storm outside. The whisper came again, this time louder and clearer. "Help me. Please." Jason turned back to the desk, his flashlight flickering. In the dim light, he saw a shadowy figure standing in the corner of the room. It was a young woman, her face pale and eyes wide with terror. She was drenched, her clothes clinging to her as if she had been caught in the rain. "Who are you?" Jason asked, his voice trembling. "My name is Emily," the woman replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was here. Years ago. I never left." Jason felt a chill run down his spine. "What happened to you?" "I was working late one night," Emily said, her voice breaking. "A man came in. He was angry, looking for something. He killed me and hid my body in the walls. I've been trapped here ever since." Jason's mind raced, trying to comprehend what he was hearing. He had heard stories about the warehouse being haunted, but he had never believed them. Now, face to face with a ghost, he couldn't deny it. "How can I help you?" he asked, wanting to do something to ease her suffering. "Find my body," Emily said, her eyes pleading. "Give me a proper burial. Only then can I find peace." Jason nodded, determined to help. He searched the office, looking for any signs of where Emily's body might be hidden. As he moved a bookcase aside, he found a small, hidden door in the wall. Forcing it open, he discovered a narrow, dark space. Using his flashlight, he crawled inside and soon found the remains of Emily's body, wrapped in an old, tattered blanket. With a heavy heart, Jason called the police and explained everything. The authorities arrived, and Emily's body was finally given a proper burial. Jason attended the small, somber ceremony, feeling a sense of relief as he watched Emily's spirit finally find peace. From that night on, the warehouse felt different. The oppressive, eerie atmosphere was gone, replaced by a sense of calm. Jason continued his work, knowing that Emily was no longer trapped in the place where she had suffered. The rain still fell on the old warehouse, but it no longer felt haunted. Instead, it was a place where a soul had been set free, thanks to the efforts of a compassionate guard on a rainy night. Story number 3: The Shadow in the Office. Laura had been working the night shift at a small marketing firm for a few years. The office building, situated in the heart of the city, was modern and sleek during the day. But at night, especially during heavy rainstorms, it transformed into a maze of shadows and strange noises. One particularly stormy night, Laura found herself alone in the office again. The rain lashed against the windows, and occasional bursts of thunder echoed through the empty hallways. She was used to the sound of the rain, but tonight, it seemed louder and more persistent, making it hard to focus on her work. Around midnight, she decided to take a break and grab a cup of coffee from the break room. As she walked down the corridor, the sound of her footsteps seemed to be swallowed by the carpeted floors. She felt a strange sense of unease, but she shrugged it off, blaming it on the storm outside. While waiting for the coffee to brew, Laura thought she heard a faint tapping noise coming from one of the offices down the hall. It was rhythmic and persistent, almost like someone gently knocking on a door. She dismissed it as a trick of the rain and returned to her desk with her coffee. A few minutes later, the tapping noise returned, louder this time. Laura paused, listening intently. The sound was coming from the office next to hers, which belonged to her boss, Mr. Thompson. She knew he had left hours ago, and there shouldn't be anyone else in the building. Curiosity getting the better of her, Laura got up and walked to Mr. Thompson's office. She hesitated for a moment before opening the door. The office was dark, illuminated only by the streetlights outside filtering through the blinds. She stepped inside, and the tapping stopped immediately. "Hello?" she called out softly, her voice barely above a whisper. There was no response. She turned to leave, but just as she reached the door, she saw a shadow move in the corner of her eye. She spun around, her heart pounding, but the office was empty. Trying to calm herself, Laura told herself it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. She returned to her desk, but the feeling of being watched persisted. Every time she looked up from her computer, she half expected to see someone standing in the doorway, but there was never anyone there. The tapping resumed, now coming from the end of the hallway. Determined to figure out what was going on, Laura grabbed her flashlight and headed toward the sound. She walked slowly, the beam of light cutting through the darkness. The tapping grew louder as she approached the storage room at the end of the hall. She reached the door and took a deep breath before opening it. The room was filled with old office supplies and filing cabinets. She stepped inside, and the tapping stopped once again. She scanned the room with her flashlight, but nothing seemed out of place. As she turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind her, plunging the room into complete darkness. Laura's heart raced as she fumbled for the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. She pounded on the door, calling for help, but her voice was drowned out by the storm. Suddenly, she felt a cold breeze brush past her, and she turned to see a shadowy figure standing in the corner of the room. It was tall and indistinct, its features obscured by the darkness. Laura's breath caught in her throat as the figure began to move toward her. "Who are you?" she managed to ask, her voice trembling. The figure stopped and seemed to stare at her. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, it said, "I used to work here. Before the accident." Laura felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard stories about a former employee who had died in a tragic accident years ago, but she had never given them much thought. Now, face to face with the ghost, she couldn't ignore it. "What do you want?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Justice," the figure replied. "I was wronged. My death was not an accident. Find out the truth." Before Laura could respond, the door flew open, and the figure vanished. She stumbled out of the room, gasping for breath. Determined to uncover the truth, she spent the next few days researching the company's history and the mysterious death. Through her investigation, Laura discovered that the former employee had been involved in a whistleblowing case, trying to expose fraudulent activities within the company. His death, officially ruled an accident, was actually a cover-up orchestrated by higher-ups who wanted to silence him. Armed with this knowledge, Laura went to the authorities and provided them with the evidence she had found. The case was reopened, and the truth finally came to light. The responsible parties were brought to justice, and the ghostly presence in the office was never felt again. Laura continued to work at the firm, but the office never felt the same. The stormy night and the ghostly encounter had changed her forever. She had uncovered a dark secret and brought peace to a restless spirit, proving that sometimes, even the dead seek justice. If you enjoy this content and want to see more, please subscribe and turn on notifications to support the channel.